here I am focusing on the topic lecturing for doctors and what I have learned from my own mentors. So when we start a lecture, I think the first 30 seconds or the first 1 to 2 minutes, I believe, it is very, very critical. It's very critical. Either you can captivate the audience or you can distract them. And this all happens when you are well prepared. So how to begin a lecture? You can begin the lecture with a story. You can start the lecture with a cartoon. You can start the lecture with a quote from a well-known personality. You can show a picture and start explaining. So here again, I will start with an example. These are all examples only. But this is a story. And this happened to me more than a decade ago. I was invited for a lecture slightly far away from my hometown in Trivandrum. So since the lecture was scheduled morning at around 10:30 a.m., I decided that I should be traveling the previous evening so that I am there in the destination and then residing in a hotel so that I will be exactly on time for my lecture. But my dear friends, do you know what happened? I was there in that city one day earlier and I reached the place at 10 a.m. The program started at 9 a.m. only to find that the keynote lecture is delivered by a very senior retired professor, and he was speaking for more than 1.5 hours. And the whole program got delayed. The entire program got delayed. And naturally, when it is a very senior professor, nobody can question. So the organizers were helpless. The organizers were clueless. The organizers were speechless. And they were asking me, can you shorten your lecture? So they were making the same request to multiple other speakers who were all scheduled for the subsequent lectures. So at the end of the day, what I have learned, and I have learned similarly from many other experiences from multiple parts of the country, especially from Kerala, the most important probably is to learn from our own. I have learned a lot from my own teachers because I have been a student of MBBS and MD medicine in government medical college in Trivandrum, and in the same medical college, the government medical college in Trivandrum, I worked for more than 10 years as a lecturer and also a assistant professor. So I have learned a lot. I have learned a lot on the basics. I have learned a lot on lecturing from my own teachers. But I need to admit before all of you that when I shifted to the Mayo Clinic for a training, and then when I got an opportunity to get exposed to an international group of top key opinion leaders from all over the world, more than 100 top speakers at the American Diabetes Association convention in 2003, I would like to admit, and this is the first time I experienced a huge change in my career. It completely changed. My exposure to the United States, my exposure first time at the American Diabetes Association convention in 2000, it completely changed my understanding about presentations in conferences. And that is the first time I realized that when I am presenting before my students in a lecture in the medical college, it is totally different from the presentation I should be delivering before an audience when I am performing a lecture for 20 minutes or for 25 minutes or sometimes only for 15 minutes. And this is exactly I am going to share with you. When you are in a conference or a convention, I have learned from my mentors, especially a couple of them from Kerala and many from other parts of India and from the United States, the timing of the lecture, the duration of the lecture is much, much more important than your English grammar or the quality or the color or the design of the slides or even the language. Very, very important. And these are some of the basics which we have learned over the last more than 2 decades. The language and the grammar may be important, but only 50% significant. When you are exposed to the international speakers, they speak in their own English. So when we speak English, we have a Malayalam tone in it. So when the Chinese speak English, it is a Chinese English. So the audience are not bothered about the language. The audience are bothered about the content of the presentation. The audience are bothered about the flow or the storyline in the presentation. There should be a natural flow in the presentation. And in the first few minutes of your presentation, especially in a face-to-face presentation, we as speakers should be capable of appreciating or learning in depth the body language from the body language of the audience so that we can modulate accordingly. Always respect the response of the audience. And that is extremely important. Sometimes I'll be presenting the same topic to a different audience. And the same set of slides can be used for different audience. So it can be for general practitioners, it can be for the cardiologists, and the same set of slides can be even for the public or for the layman or for the physicians or endocrinologists. So when the same topic is presented and when the same content is delivered, you can modulate the language and the styles in response to the level of knowledge of the audience and in response to the body language of the audience. And you know, the attention span of an average individual, it is around 20 or 25 minutes, not beyond that. And usually a successful program will last only for a maximum of 45 minutes. And even if you are a very experienced speaker, I would probably advise you to prepare for a lecture. And don't deviate from the topic. Be very focused. And if you are going to be a master for all the topics and titles in Harrison, you probably will be a jack of all trades and master of none. So I would advise you to focus on only certain areas and not every subject in medicine. And that probably will not be benefiting you. So when we were having some discussions in RSSDI on identifying speakers from Kerala, we realized that there are many speakers from Kerala, especially for diabetes. Many young, brilliant doctors are there. And of course, in rest of India, there are many popular speakers, but we need to improve the skills of the already existing speakers in Kerala, especially the young generation of general practitioners, physicians, and the endos, so that they can take up different topics in diabetes. Another example, you can show a cartoon, and this is again to captivate, this is again to attract the audience. So when you are showing a cartoon, spend sufficient time so that the audience can appreciate the theme, the characters, and simultaneously you can keep on describing in the background. And this is a scenario when a patient who is on insulin pump is visiting an emergency department, and this happens to doctors and hospitals all over the world, and this is not unique to Kerala. And this is the reason why this scenario has been included in all the national and international insulin pump guidelines. What to do when a person with an insulin pump is visiting an emergency department or getting admitted in a hospital in ICU or with an accident. So you can initiate this conversation with the help of a cartoon. And we will come to why it is important. So from national and from the international speakers, and I will describe them as seasoned speakers, you can probably learn a lot. They usually speak very clearly, and they are not too slow, or they don't speak they are not never very fast, and they are not anxious. But remember, the audience are also having an anxiety level. So as a speaker, we should also be able to bring down the anxiety levels of the audience. Don't ask unnecessary questions. And if you are among the audience, please remember, and this is a repetition from me, never equate the level of English knowledge with the level of knowledge in the subject or with the level of intelligence of the speaker. It is absolutely not connected. There are many top international speakers who are poor in English grammar. So it is not a criteria. And I have seen many doctors as speakers and I know from the personal conversations, they are okay with their presentation skills, and they are probably brave enough to have a presentation before a invited audience, but their concern is the questions at the end of the lecture. How can I confront with the questions? It is really embarrassing for me, and that is the reason why even my presentation fails, because I am more concerned. My anticipation is with the questions at the end of the presentation. So many a time, the questions are genuine questions. So the questions are all very, very genuine. But however, there will be rarely some questions to test only the knowledge of the speaker. And such questions, that embarrassing questions, happens very seldom and doesn't happen for my respectful audience. So here again, I will share my experience, because my title is sharing my own experiences. So I have been an invited speaker at the International Diabetes Federation meeting in 2009, and that was at Montreal, I believe. And there were 4 questions at the end of my presentation. And the 3 questions were very genuine, related directly to the subject. And the 4th question was unrelated to the topic of the presentation. And somehow I handled with care, somehow I managed. And some of my friends also asked me from IDF, why such question was raised? And only to realize later on, and this is also interesting, that was from a doctor from Kerala in an international conference. Instead of entertaining or encouraging a speaker from India, he was actually trying to insult the speaker. And the Kerala RSSDI, the new team, we are now well prepared only to encourage all the doctors. So our intention as a new team of Kerala RSSDI is to encourage everybody as a doctor, as a modern medicine doctor, to encourage them to be good speakers and promote academics. And this is the reason why we keep on having a lot of academic activities, many for the doctors and even for the public. So when we are presenting in a conference, and this is different from lecturing for students, when we are presenting in a conference, don't read out the slides. Never read out the slides. And don't repeat the topic again and again. And you need not explain all the content in the slides. That is not necessary. You need not explain the content in the slides. So this is another example of a relatively busy slide. So this is all about hemoglobin A1C and the limitations of using hemoglobin A1C in daily practice. So hemoglobin A1C is the 3 months of blood glucose average. And hemoglobin A1C has got multiple limitations. You have to have an NGSP standardized device for deriving the accurate results. But apart from that, 10 to 20% of the individuals will have a wrong hemoglobin A1C result. And this is because of the high prevalence of anemia, the high prevalence of hemoglobinopathies, especially in the north of India, and even the presence of pregnancy, the A1C could be wrong. And the hemoglobin A1C doesn't reflect hyperglycemia. It doesn't provide you with any information of glucose excursions, whereas with continuous glucose monitoring, you will have wealth of information on glucose excursions. And look at this cartoon. You have 3 beautiful girls over there, and all 3 of them representing the same hemoglobin A1C of 7%. However, when you are performing the continuous glucose monitoring in the same 3 individuals, the TR metrics will be entirely different. So what I am trying to convey here, not to read a busy slide, and also to have smart pictures in between to convey the messages, because a picture paints 1,000 words. And these are some of the key factors to success. Never speak in a monotonous tone. Voice modulation is important. And I will keep on repeating the word duration and timing in a lecture, and speed and clarity and content. the use of gestures. And you can use gestures, especially it is important in a face-to-face presentation. And those gestures should also be modulated in response to the audience. And the body language will be there as a successful parameter, and that need to be modulated again based on the audience response. And what are the features of a good presentation? The salient features of a good presentation. The good presentation will be professionally delivered, and it is delivered by someone who has the credibility and who is very confident in his job. And it should look like as if he is prepared. He is prepared for the lecture, and there should be clarity, and it should induce curiosity among the audience. And you should never make a very technically sophisticated lecture. You should be inducing enthusiasm, and the lecture should be in an informal way, not in a very formal manner. And you should be entertaining them. So otherwise, they will not be interacting with us. They will not be appreciating the content of the lecture. When I am discussing about the features which are pertinent to a good presentation or a successful presentation, it is equally important. It is equally important that I should also be discussing about what are the parameters which can result in a poor presentation or an unsuccessful presentation. No audience will be pleased to attend a presentation where the speaker has clearly not practiced. So even when you are an experienced speaker, I will request you to practice the same presentation. There should be a clear introduction. There should be clear take-home messages and conclusions. And you should be looking at the audience and not looking at the slides as if you are speaking on yourself. And don't read through the slides, and never be too technical, and never be too fast or too slow, and never speak with a monotone. And you should be interested in the topic, and then only you can induce interest among the audience. So this is an example of a technical presentation versus a non-technical slide. So you can transform a technical one to a non-technical one so that at least 95% of those among the audience will appreciate your slides. And remove whatever is unnecessary, but don't remove too much. And it should actually appear that it is grammatically correct. So in diabetes, whenever we are speaking nowadays, we keep on advising and requesting our doctors that nowadays all the national, the RSSDI, or whether you go for the ADA guidelines, the patient is the center of the care. So we are no longer at the center of the care. The doctor is no longer important. The patient is important. So it is a patient-centric care. Whereas when you are delivering a presentation, the audience is in the center. And they are the real heroes, not the presenter. I am not the real hero here. Those of you listening to me, you are the real heroes. And I need to highlight the main points. And I need to highlight the points so that the audience who are listening to me will remember all those salient points. And it's my duty to make all of you completely relaxed to listen to my presentation. So this is an example of how an original presentation or a slide will look like, and how I have transformed this to suit for my presentation. So the advantages of an insulin pump. So I can actually describe in long sentences, whereas the PowerPoint will look much more captivating if I can brief it in simple words, more accurate, easier to parse. Another example, original on GLP-1 receptor agonist. And this is the revised script. So you have to probably incorporate only minimum words in a PowerPoint slide. And the golden rule is limit yourself to 6 bullets per slide and a maximum 2 levels of bullets. And you can probably number them. If there is a necessity for an ordering, you can number them. And you can explain them in detail when you are lecturing, but include only the bare minimum essentials in the slides. And what about this question? What is the information the mind is going to store? So when you are lecturing and when you are hearing, the mind is capable of storing only 13% of what I am telling you. The rest you are going to forget. And if it is a smell, taste, or touch, you are probably going to store only 12% of what I am telling, what you are appreciating. If it is smell, taste, or touch. Whereas if it is a visual presentation or if it is a visual clue, then the mind is going to store 75%. So for example, this slide is in the form of a picture, in the form of a statistics or a graph. And 75% of this information will be stored in your brain. And when you are showing pictures or cartoons, there is a 200% higher chance for learning. 200% higher chance for learning. So the visuals can attract the attention of audience, and you can use it even for injecting humor, but use only those visuals which are aligning with your presentation. Don't unnecessarily include pictures in the presentation. And this is another example of a very busy slide, which probably can be there in between. So you can probably include 1 or 2 slides in between if it is so essential. For example, if it is an algorithm or if it is a protocol, but otherwise try to avoid this. So when I am including a slide similar to this, I need to make sure that the person who is at the back end of the auditorium should be able to read this. And if it is a virtual presentation, I know that more than 99% of those who are attending this program are in future going to have the same from the YouTube. They will be only using a smartphone and they won't be using a laptop or a desktop. So my fonts should be sufficiently larger enough. And I should be using a background color. We should also be facilitating the audience understanding, and never use multiple colors. You can use probably 2 or 3 colors in the entire presentation. And choosing the fonts are also important. Never use multiple fonts in the same set of slides, and use animations only if it is necessary. And if you're using animations, then it should serve a good purpose, so that you are introducing one element at a time. And you can, if you are a master with PowerPoint, you can use the presentation mode where the next slide is visible when you are speaking. And at the end of a 20 minutes or a 25 minutes presentation, we are using a presentation mode. What I have experienced myself is I will be saving at least 5 minutes at the end of a presentation. And you can use a blank screen to attract the attention if you are pausing in the middle of a presentation, or you can use a wide screen to make some cartoons, or you can have a communication with the audience. And which is a don't in a presentation. For example, when you are starting, when you're beginning your lecture, don't begin your lecture with a statement apologizing for my poor grammar. Dear doctors, apologize for my poor knowledge in the topic. Dear doctors, my apologies for my poor quality of my slides. Whereas you should be looking very, very confident. You should be looking very confident. You should be looking very happy and never be looking sad, because the same will be reflected upon the audience. So how can you conclude a presentation? So what are the concluding remarks, or how, similar to how you start a presentation, equally important will be how we are going to conclude. You can conclude with a picture. You can conclude with a statistics based on your studies, so that it will also have a visual impression. And you can probably discuss about your future research, or you can ask for a feedback from the audience, or you can move ahead with the questions and answer session. But here I am going to discuss or show a picture with my friends, and you can identify this great personality. And this is none other than the professor of professors and the teacher of teachers, none other than our own Professor Dr. K.V. Krishnadasa. And this is a snapshot. He is inaugurating JPF convention. And this is the first JPF convention exactly 10 years ago when we started our JPF International Convention. And the inauguration was scheduled at 9 a.m. in the morning. And the auditorium was almost 70% full. And 3 minutes past 9, Krishna sir called me, Jothydev, let's begin. We shouldn't be waiting. And Krishna sir said, well begun is half done. He announced over the microphone. And these are priceless words. And I have never, ever forgotten this advice from Professor Dr. Krishna sir, whom I respect a lot, because all of us have actually studied his textbook of medicine. And I have been following the same advice ever since. Well begun is half done. And time is the most critical and the crucial factor, not only in the presentations, but also in everything in life. And my dear doctors and friends, if you have the time to practice, and if you have the basic skills which has been acquired during your MBBS days, and if you have the confidence to be a speaker, and if you have the time to prepare and acquire knowledge, I promise you, you're all set to be a very good speaker. And thank you, my dear friends, for your patient hearing.